Hello and welcome back. Another video, another logic game, and once again with the same couple of repetitive agendas. One of them is noticing how easy and doable this is. This is from CAT 23 slot 1. I think probably one of the easier sets if you can figure out the language, and it can be done fairly quickly. And our second agenda, as usual, is to revise and remaster our process while tackling any such problem. And one of the major parts of the process is obviously reading and comprehending and translating well. And how effectively can I do it? Do I take 5 minutes to do it, or do I understand a major story in one go, right? So that's where you can save time, or that's where the skills differ between people, that someone will take 3-4 times to read this and someone will understand it in one go, right? So let's dive into the problem and solve it. Solving will not be too much of a challenge, but keep reminding yourself ki bro, this is such an easy case. It is from CAT 23. If I manage 2 sets, I'm hitting 99 percentile. If I just want to manage 2 sets, I have 15-20 minutes per set. That means there's plenty of time. I should not be in a hurry and commit myself to solving these easy sets. And that also means that part of the challenge will be finding which set is easy. And what is the definition of easy? That as I read the story, I understand it fairly comfortably. The first few steps are visible to me. That is my criteria for easy, right? Because if the first few steps are not visible, obviously there is time going to be spent and your confidence will start shaking. So start with a set where you can see the first couple of steps at least, or you understand the story in your 1.5 reading, right? So let's dive into this. The schematic diagram below shows 12 rectangular houses in a housing complex. So I look at the diagram, I see there are 12 houses, not a problem. House numbers are mentioned in the rectangles representing the houses A1, B1, C1, D1, E1, F1, A2, B2, C2, D2, A2, F2, great. The houses are located in 6 columns, columns A through column F, column A, column B, column C, column D, column E, column F. And if I just notice the diagram now, there are 2 blocks as well. There is block XX and there is block YY. That's what is written in the story. There are 2 blocks. The diagram also shows 2 roads. This is a road and this is a road. One passing in front of, and I now, because I see the diagram visually, I don't even need to read the sentence in too much detail. There is one road here and one road here. And some of the houses are occupied, the remaining ones are vacant, are the only ones available for sale. Now, this is the part of the story that you probably just need to read once and then not look at it again, because the diagram is right in front of you and this has no rules. This is just laying out the universe for you. This is definitely the easy part of reading, right? And even as I read this, I was like, yeah, this is a fairly easy story to follow so far. Continuing the story, and maybe this is where I might need to spend some effort, time to understand the story in detail and retain in my head, because I will need to use it over and over again while applying the rules and solving the problem. So let's dive in. The road adjacency value of a house is the number of its sides adjacent to a road. For example, the example is going to help me a lot. The road adjacency value of C2 is 2. C2 has 2 rows. This is a road and this is a road. So C2 is next to or adjacent to 2 rows. So the road adjacency value of C2 is 2. Think for yourself now. For B2 is going to be 1. For B1 is going to be 0 because it is not adjacent to any road. A1 also is going to be 0. C1 is going to be 1 because it is next to one road. A2 is going to be 1. B2 is going to be 1. C2 is going to be 2, right? So I also, after spending 30 seconds, I figure out if I want to write it down, I can write it down, or write it down according to the problem statement. I have figured out the logic that adjacency value means how many roads are next to the house. The D2 house, for example, has 2 roads. So the adjacency value here is going to be 2. The value here is going to be 1. 0, 0, 1 and 1, right? So again, maybe reading it once, trying it out once by myself, understanding this example, and then I capture this story. The neighbor count, okay, so great, I have 2 terms here, road adjacency and the neighbor count. The neighbor count of a house is the number of sides of that house adjacent to occupied houses in the same block. For example, E1 and C1. E1 and C1 can have a maximum possible neighbor counts of 3 and 2 respectively, right? Even maybe these 3 houses are occupied. D1 is occupied, F1 is occupied, and E2 is occupied, because occupied houses, right? Not just empty houses, occupied houses. So even can maximum have 3 houses which are adjacent to it, and therefore its neighborhood count or the neighbor count will be 3. And another example given was C1. C1 can maximum have C2 or C2 and B1 when they are occupied. So the maximum possible neighbor count for C1 will be 2, right? So again, put your finger somewhere else, work out the logic for yourself. For B2, I could have this house and this house full, and in that case I will have the neighbor count of 3. If only this house and this house are full and this is empty, then the neighborhood count would be 2. If this is also empty, the neighbor count will be 1, right? So I spend 30 extra seconds and I spend a little time with the data so that I'm warmed up, the term is ready in my head, right? So road adjacency value, how many roads? Neighbor count means how many occupied houses next to the house, right? So great. The base price of a vacant house is rupees 10 lakhs. If the house does not have a parking, so the base price is 10 lakhs. If it has a parking, it is 20 lakhs. The quoted price in lakhs or rupees of a vacant house is calculated as base price plus 5 into road adjacency value plus 3 into neighbor count. So for example, again I'm just taking an example to run the process in my head and get warmed up with it. So say if I think of C2 and it has no parking, the cost will be 10 lakh and it has 2 side roads, right? It is adjacent to 2 roads. That means the adjacency value is 2 into 5 lakhs, right? 5 into road adjacency, that means 2 into 5, that means I'll get another 10 lakh, and then 3 into the neighbor count. Now depending on whether there is a neighbor or not, I will multiply it by 3. So for example, if there were 2 neighbors, I would add a 6 to it, 3 into 2. If there was only one neighbor, this one was not there, then I would do 3 into 1. If there were no neighbors, I would do 3 into 0, right? So once again, not a very challenging story, but I would practice it once, twice, even before reading the rest of the rules, so that I am warmed up, so that the rule is in my head, because I will need to access it over and over again, right? So I am assuming by now the rules are in your pocket. And then the following information, the rules of the story were given. The maximum quoted price of a house in block XX is rupees 24 lakhs. The minimum in the house is 15 lakhs. And one such house is in column E, okay. Row 1 has 2 occupied houses, one in each block. So row 1, the first row, has only 2 occupied houses, one in each block. So one of these 3 is going to be full, one of these 3 is going to be full, right? And the other 2 have to be empty. Both houses in column E are vacant. Each of the column D and column F has at least one occupied house. So both these I know are definitely empty. One of these has to be full, maybe both are full. One of them has to be full, maybe both are full. As of now, I don't know. And this is my first time reading the rule. Actually, I'll start working with each rule in detail. But let's say the first time you read it, you'll say, yeah, okay, I understand. One of this is full, that one of these houses is full, one of these houses is full, one of these house has to be full, I don't know about the other one, one of these houses has to be full, don't know about the other one. So basic rules that I can understand after reading. I haven't even played with the first rule yet, right? And there is only one house with parking space in block YY. So as I work out the details, these rules will meld together or combine together to help me eliminate options and come to the detailed story of who lives here, or which house is occupied, which house is empty, what is the price, etc. So let's go step by step. So far if you notice, the major part of your process was reading the story, translating it well, warming up with it, knowing what the logic involved is. So I know the formula now, 10 plus 5 into adjacency value plus 3 into neighbor count, or 12 plus 5 into road adjacency plus 3 into neighbor count, right? So the maximum quoted price of a house in block XS is rupees 24 lakhs. Now I'm thinking of 24. Let me start with, let's say, a 12, right? And the process is trial and error, right? We have to master this game. Trial and error means just starting with the value and seeing if it works or not. You're not going to have a formula. You're not going to come to the value directly. You have to try it out. So I start with the house. This house is with parking. Let's say it's 12. So 12 lakh, and let's say there is this is this house, both the roads are adjacent, so I say 5 into 2 because there are two roads. So 12 plus 10, I've got 22 lakhs. If I add a neighbor count even of 1, 12, 22 plus 3, I will get 25. So this particular story is not working for me. Let me go a step back and I say, okay, what if the road count is 1? 12 plus 5 gives me 17. I will need another 7 to reach 24. But 7 is not a multiple of 3. Remember, my story was 10 lakh plus 5 into road plus 3 into house count or neighbor count. This is not a multiple of 3, so again this story also is not working for me. That means if I want to start with this story, it has to be 5 into 0. And let's say if I want to hit 24 lakhs, the remaining 12 lakhs has to come from this 3 into the house count, or the neighbor count. That means 3 into 4 will give you 12, but the neighbor count can never be 4. The maximum possible is 3, right? Because if you think of this house, there are only 2 neighborhood houses. Even if they are both occupied, neighbor count will be 2. If you choose this house or this house, you might get 3 neighbors. So the maximum possible is 3. For this particular story, you will need to put a 4 there. So why did I start with this? Actually, I'm starting with the wrong number. I figured this out earlier directly with 10 only, right? I tried the 10 story and I got the number. The reason I'm starting with 12 is you try out the story, you keep the rules in your mind and it will work or not work. In this case, it is not working for me, right? So I'm testing all the scenarios. So essentially, I realized that this 12 story starting with 12 lakhs is not working for me at all. Let me start with 10 lakhs. Let me start with 2. Road adjacency maximum possible is 2. So you will do 10 plus 10 and you want to hit a total of 24. That means you'll have to have 4 lakhs. Again, 4 is not a multiple of 3. So this story is not going to work for me. Okay. 10 plus 5, let me try. 10 plus 5, 15. I want to get to 24. I want to do 3 into 3. This story is working for me. Wow. Very little effort to figure out that this particular house is 5 into 1, has one road, it is next to one road, so it has to be one of these 3 houses, and it has 3 neighbors. That is only possible for B2. B2 has a neighbor A2, B2 has a neighbor C2, B2 has a neighbor B1. If you think of any other house, check it for yourself, you can maximum get a house count of 2, right? So if this is the story, then I know B2 is the house that we're talking about. This particular house is worth 24 lakhs. And I also now know that A2, C2 and B1 are occupied, right? So trial and error is a major part of your any logic game. And this is where most people struggle also, because most of our school maths or whatever problem solving is very formula driven. We don't get, okay, this is the data, try out a few values and see which works. But notice your hundreds of sets, or at least 60, 70 of them, you will see that this is happening. You have to start plugging in the value and then the solution will appear to you. So after very little effort, from the very first sentence, I got the house. Which house are we talking about? B2 is the house and these 3 houses are occupied. I also know B2 is empty, and we'll see more rules which will help me deduce more information. So from the very first piece of information, after maybe 1 minute of trying it out, I get the answer, which is what tells me that this set is fairly easy and doable, right? Because I got this value pretty quickly. So great, let's capture it more formally. B2 is the house we're talking about. B2 is worth 24 lakhs. A2, B1 and C2 are the houses occupied. I hope the logic is also very, very clear to you in terms of why this is happening, right? The second half of the story is a little more effort, but because of that early victory that I got in the story, I'm assuming that most people will be willing to try it out, fight it out. And if they commit to the process, then it won't take too much time, right? The second part of the first piece of information was the minimum quoted price of a house in block YY is rupees 15 lakhs, and one such house is in column E. So one of these houses, E1 or E2, is worth 15 lakhs, and one such house, that means both can't be 15 lakh, right? Furthermore, let me run through the rules over and over again. This is the part that you need to read and keep reading, especially if you're not getting a breakthrough. Look at the rules again. Know that the clue is somewhere hidden there. I go through the story. Row 1, this is the first row, has 2 occupied houses, one in each block. So great, this is occupied and only one of them is occupied. That means I know this is empty, this is empty. Let tick mark be the sign for an empty house, right? So I have figured out a lot of the story from this. Great. One in each block, right? So again, out of these three, only one of them is occupied. I do not know which one, but out of D1, E1, F1, one of them is occupied, and only one of them is occupied. Great. Let me read further. Both houses in column E are vacant. So I know for sure this is empty, this is empty. Again, go back to the previous rule. Row 1 has two occupied houses, one in each block. I know E1 is empty. That means out of D1 and F1, one has to be occupied, right? So keep these, maybe you want to write them down, but they can be kept orally or mentally in your head, that out of D1 and F1, one has to be occupied. Both houses in column E are vacant. Each of column D and column F has at least one occupied house. That means out of these two, one of them is definitely at least occupied. One of them is definitely occupied, right? Now run the story by yourself. If this is occupied, this will have to be empty because I can only have one occupied house in this particular row. If this is occupied, this would be empty and this will have to be full. If this is occupied, this will have to be empty and this will have to be full because the rule says one of them at least is full, right? So again, I tried out the rule, I'm warming up with it, I'm just seeing what the scenario says, right? Now, you might be wondering that why did I not start playing with the 15 lakh game directly, right? What is the possible story? But these rules are going to help me with that. So let's see furthermore. There is only one house with parking space in block YY. So great, I've got a picture that one of them is going to be full, one of them is going to be empty. Out of these two, I know one of them at least has to be full. Out of these two, at least has to be full. So great. Now let me go back to that 15 lakh story. And it says one such house is in column E. That means in this 15 lakh story, we are thinking of E1 or E2. Okay. So let's try it out. Let's say E2 is the house. And let's say again, because we're trying it out, let's say E2 is the house without parking. So you have 10 lakh. But it is next to a road. It will be 10 plus 5, 15 lakhs. In fact, you can think here also, if it had a parking, you would say 12 plus 5 minimum you have to do. That makes it 17. That means this story is definitely not going to work out. If E2 is the 15 lakh house, this is the only possible story. But this story means that there are the 10 plus 5 plus I had to do 3 into the neighbor count as well, right? And that should be 15 lakhs. That means the neighbor count is 0. That means this house is empty, this house is empty. What did the rule say? Out of these two houses, one of them has to be full. If this is empty, this will be full. If this is empty, this will be full. But then both of them will be full. But that is not allowed. That means this story is not going to work for me. That means E2 is not going to work for me. That means this 15 lakh rupee house that I'm thinking of is E1. Right? So E1 and E2 are both empty, but this is 15 lakh rupee house is not E2, it has to be E1. So this is the 15 lakh rupee house. Okay, great. Now let's see how do we come to that 15 lakhs. Can I start with a 10 lakh? There is no road there, so that will be 5 into 0 or just 0. And then I need a 5 lakh to get 15, which is not possible because 5 is not a multiple of 3. 3 into the house count, right? So this story 10 plus 5 or whatever is not going to work for me. Let me try again. Now let me try it with 12. If I do a 12 and a 3, I get a 15 quite easily. That means this is the house and it is a house with parking. That's why the starting price is 12 lakhs. And one of the neighbors is there. Out of D1 and F1, one of the neighbors is definitely there, right? If F1 is the neighbor which is occupied, then D1 will be empty. If D1 is the neighbor, then F1 will be empty, which is because of the other rule which said that row 1 can have only one house per block which is occupied, right? But I've already figured out that E1 is the house that we're talking about. E1 is the 15 lakh house and E1 has a parking. That means no other house has a parking. Great. So I know next to E1, D1 and F1, one of them has to be empty. So now I know that next to E1, F1 and D1, one of them has to be occupied. Let me try out the story. So let me try out the story. Let's say D1 is occupied. That means F1 is empty. If F1 is empty, F2 has to be occupied because the rule said one of them at least is occupied. Now look at the price of this house. This house cannot have a parking because there is only one house with parking. So the base price for F1 is going to be 10 lakh. It has one neighbor occupied, so it will be 10 plus 3 into 1. There is no road, so I'm not writing that 5 into something. 10 plus 3 gives me 13. Is that possible? No, that is not possible because it says the minimum quoted price is 15. So this 15 lakh house is the lowest priced house. So if I try out this story, F1 becomes 13, which is not going to work for me, right? Which tells me very clearly that F1 is the house which is occupied. That means D1 is empty. That means D2 is definitely occupied, right? And with that, I am pretty much done with the story. I still don't know anything about F2. So F2 may or may not be occupied. As of now, I don't know. So I've gone through the rules, played out the game. I figured out that E1 is 15 lakhs, D1 is the house which is occupied, is empty, therefore D2 is full. Why is that? Because of one particular rule. If this is empty, this has to be full because of another particular rule. So all the rules have been applied and the story has been figured out. Now we can move towards the questions. So this is the house with parking and this is the house with the cost of 15 lakhs. This is occupied, this is occupied, this is empty, this may or may not be empty. So let's try out the questions. How many houses are vacant in block XX? This I could have done way earlier. 3 houses are vacant in block XX. Again, a reminder that let's say if you're struggling with the problem, but you figured out the first step after a little bit of calculation, hit the questions and see what you can do because this question could have been done 5 minutes earlier in the process, right? Which of the following houses are definitely occupied? F2 and A2. F2, don't know, so F2 and A2 cannot be the answer. A2 is occupied, but F2 I do not know. D2 and B2. D2 is occupied, B2 is not occupied, not my answer. D2, D2 and B1 are occupied, are definitely occupied. A1 and D2, A1 is empty, D2 is full, so this will not be my answer. So my answer will be option C, right? And again, so notice that the second set of the rules is where you might take some time. But again, the steps are quite straightforward. You read the rule, you tried out the rule and you got the answers fairly quickly. And that's why I'm putting this in the easy category. Most people will see the starting step and will be able to take the starting step. Let's say compared to the scheduling problem that you might see next, where you read it, then you have to read it again, and then it's still ambiguous in terms of what is happening, and it will require some extra effort in the beginning. This does not require effort in the beginning, so let that be a clue to what is easy, what is difficult, right? Which of the following options best describes the number of vacant houses in row 2? This is row 2, this is definitely vacant, this is definitely vacant, this may or may not be vacant, so 2 or 3, so my answer would be option B. Again, not a challenge at all now. This we have already done. Next question. What is the maximum possible quoted price in lakhs of rupees for a vacant house in column E? Great. Think of column E. This you already know 15. This was the minimum price. So you're thinking of E2. E2 does not have a parking, so you're starting with 1. It has a road, so you will do 5 into 1, which is 10 plus 5, 15. Now, if both you want to maximize, that means the neighbor count should be as high as possible. So this should be occupied and you should go for this particular story that this is also occupied. So your answer will become 3 into 2. So 10 plus 5, 15 plus 6, 21. Answer for this particular question will be 21 lakhs, right? And that's it. We are done with the set. And again, I hope you notice the length of the video also. Even with the description, with the explanation and some pointers, etc. It's not very long. So that is another indicator that the number of steps required was not very high in this particular story. There was an early investment upfront in understanding the story well, keeping the rules in your mind so that you can use them that 10 plus 5 into something plus 3 into something, that rule was imprinted in my memory. So the moment I looked at the price, I deployed it very quickly. So reading is a major part of the game. Then your very basic logic and the and the need to play or try it out. It said 24 lakhs, so I start with a 10 lakh story. In my case, I started with the wrong story just to demonstrate the process that you try out a number. If it doesn't work, you try out the next number, right? Some of you will be lucky and you will get to 24 lakhs very quickly. You will say 10 plus 5 plus 9 is 24, and no other combination is taking you to 24, so that story gets logged in. That immediately tells you that it has 3 neighbors, so it has to be one of it could be B1 or B2, but it has a road also, so it has to be B2. So notice that at the micro level, the deduction is always very easy, right? It has a 5 lakhs, it has a road, that means B1 is not the answer, B2 is the answer, and these 3 are occupied. Once I had this rule, another rule told me that in this row there is only one occupied house, which told me these are empty. Not that they were needed in the question immediately, but I got this piece. And the set opened up for me because my steps were effective right at the beginning, right? So again, reminder, this is a CAT 23 set. If you manage this set and another out of the other 2 doable ones, one of them was very easy, one was, I would say, doable because it required some effort. The set wasn't challenging, but it required work to be done. This one did not even require too much work. So I would say the first challenge, the problem set 1, and this is the fourth challenge, I would put in the, as usual, as I say, the 2 very easy category that anybody can try even without too much training. They should know what the basic game is, but no extensive variety of learning things is required. Keep it simple, stupid, right? So let that be the lesson for today. There is easy stuff, I need to master easy stuff, and I need to master my basic process, right? So this is it for this video. I'll see you very soon with the next challenge in this particular course. Bye.